Varus is now a legitimate flex pick in 3 different roles, Malphite has finally dropped out of the OP tier for top lane, and Nunu is no longer the OP pick that we saw to start the year. So we've got a pretty big meta shift in the upper echelon of each role for 26.2, and we'll be breaking it down and providing you guys with an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role. And if you guys want to stay ahead of the meta for Season 16, then SkillCapped is the place to be. We've got a new course for this year that our challenger players will be working on, and it revolves around keeping you up to date with all the new meta trends. The new Varus build that everyone has been raving about this patch is something we already covered weeks ago in our meta update course, so you could have been abusing an OP tier build for way longer than everyone else. As soon as we discover something new, you can expect a video to go live within that course, breaking down exactly what we've found. Whether it be a new build, strategy, or rune setup, SkillCapped subscribers will be the first to know with access to this course. On top of this, we've got our weekly commentaries where our challenger experts walk you through how to carry out of the exact rank you're stuck in. We always upload 10 brand new commentaries each week focused on covering the best champions in meta, and then of course you'll get access to our entire catalog of premium courses, as you'll be mastering wave control, vision, trading, and macro in no time. And the best part of it all is that we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee. Climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped or get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the top right corner of the screen or in the description below to get ahead of everyone else for Season 16. So the biggest riser for 26.2 has been without question top lane Varus. We honestly should have just went ahead and bumped him into OP tier during our pre-patch tier list, but we honestly weren't expecting him to gain this much popularity. Play rate has shot up to around 4%, while Varus top currently holds the highest win rate across most elo brackets, so there's really no question as to whether he's an OP pick or not. Of course, Varus did get buffed for this patch, which is a factor in his rise, but it's really the Dusk and Dawn build that was already making him a super strong pick. You rush Dusk and Dawn into Nashers, and your upfront burst potential with this build is absolutely disgusting. By using E into 2 auto attacks and an empowered Q, you chunk the enemy's health bar for about 70%, so if you were to add in your R to that combo, then the one-shot potential is insane. Because of the Dusk and Dawn passive, you only need 2 autos to proc press the attack, while you're also gaining 2 instant stacks of Varus W passive every time you use an ability and then auto attack. We're pretty confident that either Dusk and Dawn or Varus is going to get nerfed for 26.3, so if you want to abuse this build, then you only have about a week left to do so. So at the very start of the season, it was pretty unclear as to which Kayle build was the most optimal, but we now have a more concrete idea. Just like on Varus, Dusk and Dawn has turned into a must-buy item on Kayle, as it's slotting in as her second purchase incredibly well. Kayle is still liking Nashers in her rush slot the most, while you go into Dusk and Dawn after that. Basically, any champion who can abuse the Dusk and Dawn with Nashor's core is looking like a top tier pick for 26.2, as Echo is another champion who's been loving that item combo. So as long as the item does not get nerfed, then Kayle is going to remain in a really powerful spot, and we'll be bumping her up with Varus into the OP tier for mid-patch. So if we have a look at the top lane tier list, the OP tier is going to be shuffling around, with Kennen remaining from pre-patch, but Kayle and Varus jump up to join him. We had Ornn and Riven in the OP tier going into the patch, and they would still be there if it weren't for how ludicrous Kayle and Varus are with Dusk and Dawn. We wouldn't be surprised if in 26.3 we go back to moving Ornn and Riven into the OP tier, so there's no reason to drop your priority on them if you've been enjoying them to start the season. Ornn is now the premier top lane tank that you can play for solo queue due to the fact that Malphite has been heavily nerfed. The crazy thing about Malphite changes though is that they dropped his win rate by 3%, which for most champs would be a death wish, but since Malphite was upwards of a 53% win rate champion in 26.1, he's still above an A tier level despite the nerfs. Aatrox was one top lane champ who got buffed, and he's seen a nice rise in strength. It looks like the buff has added around 1.5% win rate to the champion, so Aatrox is definitely no longer a more average B tier pick, as he's back in A for 26.2. So the upper echelon of top lane and jungle is solely made up of Dusk and Dawn champions right now, and one pick who was really underrated last patch that players have caught on to more in 26.2 is Volibear. So Volibear with a Dusk and Dawn rush is absolutely crushing everyone for this patch, and our challenger jungler Skillshot already has a brand new full game commentary where he's playing this build that is up on our website. Dusk and Dawn works amazing for Volibear because he gets to stack his passive faster, which amplifies skirmish strength in the early to mid game. Even Bandle Pipes is a great pickup on the champion as well, with the nerf to the item not really doing a whole lot to reduce its power in 26.2. Volley in general has also liked a lot of the Season 16 jungle changes, especially the additional movement speed that you get from completing your quest, as movement speed is such an important stat for a champion like Volley, who lacks a dash on a basic ability. So Volibear is going to be bumped up into the OP tier for mid-patch, joining alongside the 2 other best Dusk and Dawn users. So for the jungle tier list in 26.2, a lot of the changes we've made are just small tweaks to the junglers who got adjusted for this patch. So first off, the Taliyah buffs really missed the mark, as she actually ended up losing win rate. When a champion has such a low play rate, it's always more difficult to get a good read on how powerful they actually are. So even though Taliyah jungle had a 50% win rate in 26.1, it must have been only Taliyah one tricks that were playing her, so her analytical showing was being inflated by that. So even though we bumped Talia into A tier for pre-patch, she's going back down to B. Jace and Malphite are both pretty dead junglers now, at least for solo queue. We may still see them being prioritized in pro, but for solo queue specifically, there are so many more powerful options to choose from. The Zed nerf actually didn't hit quite as hard as we initially were expecting, as usually losing clear speed can drop a jungler's win rate by up to 3 or 4%, but Zed has only dropped about 1% due to the nerf, so he's getting placed back in A tier for 26.2. We noted in the pre-patch tier list that if nerfs did hit on the harsher side, we could see Lilia dropping down into A tier, and it's played out like that, so she's being bumped down a tier. And then if you were someone who enjoyed the Aatrox jungle during the end of last season, then he's back in a spot to where he's worth considering again after his buffs. We have a pretty clear top 3 in the jungle meta right now, as Diana, Echo, and Volibear are all phenomenal carries with their ability to synergize with Dusk and Dawn so well. So usually mid lane is a role that has at least a few changes featured for each patch, but 26.2 didn't see any traditional mid lane champs adjusted, so we have a very similar looking tier list to last patch. The only minor change we were making is moving Varus up into the S tier. Solo lane Varus is absolutely incredible right now with his Dusk and Dawn build, so if you are someone who likes to queue top and mid, then you can look to spam some Varus for this patch. If you're someone who enjoys playing the off-meta mid lane picks, then Sion mid is super strong for Season 16. The mid lane meta for Season 16 is more about being able to get your side lanes ahead because of how powerful their quests are. You can snowball really hard as a top laner or an ADC in Season 16, and by playing Sion, you're able to impact the map incredibly well at level 6 with your R. He can also neutralize a lot of lanes because of his tankiness from his W shield, along with taking Doran's shield so you can blind pick him and not have to worry about getting hard countered. Not just Sion, but Pantheon, Aurelion Sol, Twisted Fate, and Talon are all mid lane champs who are performing really well for this season, where roaming and playing through the side lane in the mid game is much more viable. So one of the most popular ADC in the game right now, who got even better for 26.2, is Caitlyn. With the buffs to Hex Optics, C44, Caitlyn has been performing really well with the item. Where you should actually be slotting the item into your build path is just tough to say though right now, because it's performing quite well as a rush, second, or third item. Third item is where it's being played the most and has the best win rate, so it's most likely the optimal spot to grab it, but we'll have to see if that changes at all in the coming patches. Rushing the Collector, going into Infinity Edge second, and then Hex Optics third is what's working really well. Caitlyn is even performing very well with an energized setup, taking Storm Razor and Rapid Fire Cannon, so there's lots of variety on the champ to start the season. Into comps that are more durable, having the added attack speed from Storm Razor and Fire Cannon can help with your consistent DPS in fights, but into more squishy champions, just going all out AD with the Collector and Hex Optics is really strong. So for Caitlyn's tier list placement, we're going to be moving her up into the S tier for mid-patch. So Kai'Sa has been one of the poorer performing ADCs to start Season 16, as her regular on-hit builds just aren't as strong as many of the crit setups that other ADCs get to run. However, there is a new Kai'Sa build going around that actually makes her a good pickup. Drop Nashor's Tooth from your third slot on Kai'Sa and start running Dusk and Dawn. Dusk and Dawn provides Kai'Sa with so much burst and DPS potential in fights, because whenever you use an ability, your next auto attack is going to apply 2 stacks of the Kraken Slayer passive and 2 stacks of Kai'Sa's own passive. So your assassination potential with this build goes up tremendously, as you only need 4 total autos to proc your passive and 2 autos to proc Kraken Slayer. And if you can play with a support who has some strong CC, then it becomes absolutely insane as to how many passive procs you're able to get off in a short amount of time. The stats for Dusk and Dawn as a third item on Kai'Sa are completely insane right now, with the item winning 5% more than Nashor's Tooth. Nashor's does have a sample size of 60,000 games, while Dusk and Dawn is lower at 21,000, so there's definitely a bit of win rate inflation due to the lower sample. However, 21,000 games is still a ton of games to have that high a win rate. So the core to run on Kai'Sa for this patch consists of a Kraken Rush into Rageblade second, followed by Dusk and Dawn third. Without this build, Kai'Sa is no better than a B tier ADC, but if you're taking the setup, then she's A tier for sure, so we're moving her up into A for mid-patch. So for the ADC tier list in 26.2, we have a few movers, as Kate is joining the S tier, Kai'Sa slots into A, and then Varus is moving up into A as well. So Varus ADC is definitely not quite as powerful as mid and top, but he's still in a great spot if you're taking his Dusk and Dawn build. With the buffs this patch, and as more players pick up the build, Varus win rate for ADC has literally gone up over 3%, so he went from a basement dwelling C tier pick all the way up to A in the span of one patch. It doesn't look like the item buffs to Hex Optics or Fiend Hunter have led to a significant boost in power for any ADCs. Yunara, who was the most common Fiend Hunter user in 26.1, only gained around 0.5% win rate with the item, so it hasn't been all that impactful. Hex Optics still isn't being played at a very high rate on any ADCs, as Jinx and Caitlyn are 2 champs finding the most success, but even then the pick rate of the item is only around 10% on both champs, so it's tough to get a good read as to whether it's actually optimal for them. So the big change that was supposed to have an impact on the support meta for 26.2 was the nerf to Bandle Pipes, but it looks like Riot may have missed the mark with this one. Honestly, we were expecting for Bandle Pipes to fall off at least a little more than it has, but looking at the data so far, the win rate of the item barely budged from last patch. So even with the cost going up by 300 gold, it remains a really powerful pickup. For instance, Braum has been a huge Bandle Pipes abuser, and in 26.1, the win rate of the item as a rush was sitting around 54.76%. Jump ahead to 26.2, where the item has now been nerfed, and the win rate of Bandle Pipes on Braum is still up at 54.37%. So a 0.39% decrease in power, which is super negligible, and you should continue taking Bandle Pipes on Braum and many other melee supports for 26.2. On some other supports like Rel and Leona, we have seen Bandle Pipes come down about 1%, so a little more than Braum, but even then, a 1% drop does not make the item a bad pickup by any means. And as a result of the nerf not hitting as hard as we expected, Braum is going to be moved back into the OP tier. With Bandle Pipes being the only significant change to the support role for 26.2, we don't have any other changes to the tier list, as the OP tier is going to be locked down by Sona and Braum. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So that's going to be all for this one, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.